Let's talk some Kentucky recruiting today. The Wildcats, they've been gaining momentum on the recruiting trail really since the season began. And this weekend, the Florida Gators come to town, and it's a chance to showcase UK in front of all the recruits that we'll be watching. So Kentucky fans, we're going to get started here in a second, but do me a favor right now. Like this channel. Subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. Do me a favor. I'd really appreciate it. We want to get Kentucky involved. We love talking Wildcats recruiting, so go ahead, hit that subscribe button. All right, let's bring on Nick Roush of KSR to break this one down. Now, Nick, Kentucky has found recent success against the Florida Gators in recent years. Is this a game that the UK staff wants to get recruits out to see?
It certainly is, and there is one little wrinkle into this situation. It's one the Big Blue Nation has been talking about quite a bit this week. The start time. Noon start times aren't ideal, especially for underclassmen where it's all unofficial visits. Well, I mean, most of these are unofficial visits, but getting guys who are playing Friday night football games to travel to get there in time for a noon kickoff is a little bit tough, but it's been a sellout crowd for quite a while. And the environment should be electric. So this is what they've been teeing this up for a while to have a big recruiting event for games like this when Florida comes to town as a top 25 team.
So from a more macro level, maybe not even just the 24 class, but 25, 26, what would a win this weekend mean for recruiting?
Big picture, it could help them really wedge their way back into Florida. You started to see that some last year. Mike Stoops spent some time recruiting in that area and then was able to get former Michigan State commit, four-star linebacker Javant Brown there at the 11th hour on signing day. So this is a good way for them to get back into that. And it's another part, too. They've been recruiting Georgia very heavily, and beating Florida means a lot in that state to anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. So I know there might be a couple of guys we talk about, but Kentucky's already got 4 commitments from the state of Georgia. They got one at 3 a.m. Friday night. Devin Smith lost his game, but he realized he still promised a commitment. He's the latest guy from the state of Georgia. So getting a signature win over Florida, I know they've got, one SEC East title under Dan Mullen. They aren't the Spurrier Florida, but that win still reverberates among kids that Kentucky's recruiting in the South.
Yeah. One thing Kentucky fans and Georgia fans have in common there, and that is they like to beat Florida. Now, what are the streets saying in terms of who the most important recruit will be on the sidelines this weekend?
Kentucky has tried to keep this tight-lipped. The nature of recruiting at Kentucky, especially when you're trying to maybe flip some big names, some blue-chip guys from blue-chip programs, they like to keep things tight-lipped until it's late. But there's plenty of scuttlebutt that Brian Robinson will be on campus. He's really giving Kentucky fans an introduction how big boy recruiting goes because he officially visited in June. There was a lot of buzz then that he would commit right after that visit, but he still took his trips to Penn State, Michigan. He even camped at Ohio State. So there's been a lot of will he, won't he, what's actually going on here.
Right.
But now there is some momentum that he could pop and announce a commitment to Kentucky this week. Well, he might even do it at the game. Who knows? So that's one to certainly keep an eye on. The other one is Rico Scott, an Alabama wide receiver commit, whose teammates with 2025 Kentucky quarterback commit Stone Saunders. Both not confirmed, but there's some rumor that those big names could be on campus for the Florida game this Saturday.
Yeah, and Brian Robinson, I mean, he is a big-time pass rusher on the edge. Do you think that there's a chance that he could be the next commitment for Kentucky?
I certainly do, because this is one that Vince Marrow has been working on for a long time. He's originally from the Youngstown area. That's right up Vince Marrow's stomping grounds. Brian camped at Kentucky last fall, and even when things seemed to be going in a different direction, Kentucky was persistent. They've stayed persistent, and throughout this entire process, and I think it's going to pay off. I think it's going to pay off soon. But like I said, it's big boy recruiting, and you don't know until they go ahead and make that announcement. And then you still got to get to across the finish line in December.
Well, like we said, a win over Florida could be the difference maker for some of these guys. Now, one prospect that's not going to be there, but I want to wrap it up and talk about him first. Kentucky makes the cut for two-way Georgia athlete Cam McKell. He's a four-star prospect, and he is visiting Kentucky at the end of the month. It's interesting because I think he could possibly make a commitment in early November. So, I'm sorry, he's going to visit at the end of October. I forgot, we're still in September. But he'll visit at the end of October, and that could be the last visit he makes. Is this one that Kentucky could steal away in the end? Because there's a lot of competition for Cam McKell. He was at Florida last weekend. He's been out to Colorado. Georgia's involved. Tennessee's involved. But Kentucky, they might get him on campus last.
Yeah, and that's really what you're hoping for, because the interesting part about McKell, Kentucky's been a school over the years where they've done really well on the trail, recruiting these two-way players and just saying, pick your side,
right.
We'll let you play it. Because I know Georgia, they initially recruited him at cornerback. But Kentucky's like, hey, come here. We'll take you as a wide receiver. Justin Rogers was their first big five-star get. A lot of places wanted to play offensive line. They said, come here and play defensive line, and that's what sealed the deal. The wrinkle in this is that Coach Prime, I think, is like, why don't you play both? Which is not one you ever typically see. Chris Collins has done a good job with some of these bigger fish at getting them on campus for official visits. There was a kid that ended up, I think, at Florida that was a blue-chip cornerback during the last cycle, that they were able to get these guys in Lexington but couldn't seal the deal. This certainly, having him late, helps. Collins has made some major movement in this cycle, actually getting some commitments. It could be a big one, but you just I worry about the Coach Prime factor. Like, you just never – that's such a wild card right now. There's no precedent for it. So does the Travis Hunter pitch work for him? Mm-hmm. Or is he good enough just saying, I could be this receiver who – I mean, look at what the receivers are doing in Kentucky as freshmen. I know a lot of guys, they like getting preached early time. Kentucky's got a decent pitch, but can it beat out Coach Prime? That's just – it's fascinating to watch unfold, Josh.
I know, man. Kentucky recruiting. You got to battle the SEC programs year in, year out. And now Coach Prime is even getting involved in some of these targets. But Cam McKell, he's a really good one out of the state of Georgia. And you said it at the top. Hey, a win this weekend could reverberate in the state of Florida and the state of Georgia. It could go a long way in helping with Cam McKell. Nick Roush, you guys have it all covered on KSR. Kentucky fans, go check it out in the days leading up to this Florida game. You guys will have all the recruiting coverage there. Nick, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that content, be sure to subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We have a new page dedicated only to recruiting. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now.